maybe both of us, hopefully
Send
capture
those
those.
to you and then you.
Hopefully the live stream will, hopefully those
Oh, that's-
could be a backup and
Absolutely, yeah,
just
that's
the live
always
stream will be fine. and
that's
she can
good.
do it.
plan. All right, then we'll go ahead and jump into things. The one thing that I fairly consistently forget about, I actually wrote down, and that was to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, feedback, questions? Good. All right, all those approved? Thank you very much. All right, moving on. Zoning update. Just so happens that Mike and Tyler and I were just there. So, listen, this is so much more in your guys' wheelhouse than mine. I sat there and I took notes, but if you'd like to share with everybody kind of where we are, that would be
Do you want me to take
Sure.
it? All right, feel free to jump in.
Awesome.
I scribbled as many of the dates he was rattling off as I could. So we had a very good meeting with Jeremy over at the town of Camden today. It sounds like he would be supportive of the rezoning to a B4. I think we had talked about that a couple meetings ago. It's a zone that exists just up the street. It's a little bit more restricted than the transitional river business zone that we had talked about before, but it had all of the criteria that we were kind of looking at as a group. So it would allow for, with a special exception, personal businesses, kind of low impact things. It allowed all of the school functions. So it really seemed like the best way to go for both the school department's function and respect for the neighborhood around, kind of giving some limitation, and then combine that with the oversight that the school board will provide through their lease agreements in the basement. That really seemed to make a lot of sense. So in order to get a spot on the warrant for November, it's actually again, we kind of expected a fairly long process. It sounded like we would need to have something in by the 19th to get on the first round with the planning board. So I'm not sure.
Isn't the planning board meeting the 19th?
They meet on the 19th.
So we need something like next week, don't we?
Most likely. So one of the things that, and maybe Marcia and Peter could share what needed to go back to the school board. That was one thing that we weren't.
I think the board left it to this committee.
I think so too. I think it was
Okay.
really, I think the board is kind of waiting for the outcome of the committee and has kind of authorized the committee to do a lot of this investigation. That's what this is, and I know they don't want to hold this up.
No.
So.
Okay, excellent. So I think the, Jeremy was gonna go through and kind of put together the timeline of all of the different steps, the meetings that were involved. There are the two entities, both the planning board and the board of selectmen, that need to be involved in that process. So he was gonna take a look at that today and tomorrow, get us some final dates. I think we are planning on starting to put the application together next week using the one that we did for the height for the middle school, kind of as the base. It's very similar in what we're doing. He was checking on the map change as well, so changing the zone for this contiguous piece. And then we will carry forward the language that was in the last ordinance revision for the height of the middle school into this new zone so that there's consistency through the process, so that what's going to be built will still meet all of the applicable zoning regulations.
Would the bus barn also be in that zone?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a question that actually came up. So for Jeremy's recommendation, he felt that the B4 really kind of afforded the best option, as Tyler said. And that's the whole parcel. It is not, Mike even kind of touched on it, is it just for this kind of the MAT piece, but it is the entire parcel. And to Tyler's point, I think it would be then up to the board essentially to kind of finesse the lease agreement in terms of what they would or would not feel comfortable with.
Can I ask, what is the zone now and what the difference between the current zoning and the B4 zoning is?
Yep, so it's currently in the village zone. And you have
I have village right here.
yeah, the village is very restrictive on what you can do outside of these municipal functions that the school is falling under.
Yeah, so it allowed uses are basically single-family, two-family, multifamily dwellings, cemeteries, churches, And the commercial uses is outdoor storage of boats, or in barns, hotels or motels, municipal boat ramps, essential services, road construction, and accessory uses. So it's limited, ironically.
So the
for a
B4
vil-
allows us then to rent out the basement areas. that-
So it has the
to
professional
need-
office and tradesman use.
Okay, got
And
it.
it seems backwards, but the tradesman use, which would seem like that might need more review, is actually an allowed use in the B4, and a special exception use is professional office
In B4,
in B4.
so it would still need a special exception.
Yeah,
No, tradesman was an allowed use in B4.
right. But professional office wasn't a special exception. I don't have that
So
one.
that
Yeah,
adds
oh.
quite a level of, so it would have to go through, meet all the school board's guidelines, and then have to convince the zoning board of appeals that it didn't have a major impact on the
Does
quality
the,
of life.
does the planning board or the zoning board give the special exception?
Currently, it's the zoning board. They don't meet all that often. But I think there's some talk about shifting
That
that
responsibility?
to the planning board, because apparently that's not, in most towns, Jeremy says that that's not the way it works. We don't, zoning boards don't do that kind of work.
So, I mean, it seems like, it is another step, but it doesn't seem like it's a bad one.
No, I think it'll probably put people's minds at ease.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was Jeremy's point as well, is that
Yeah.
this is a little bit more appropriate for the given neighborhood that surrounds it.
You had mentioned about the bus barn, and I was wondering, is there any gonna be extra space in there once Zenith moves in the offices that might be able to be rented out as well?
It's possible.
That will,
I mean, I know that there's anticipating taking 3 or 4 bays for buses.
Yeah.
the more that we turn that into either rentable or office space, the more of a parking crunch that we will have on site, which will be one challenge.
That's crazy.
So we can kind of cross
Yeah,
that road
I
as we
mean,
get there.
I had a conversation with Jeremy, like, that, no one's considering these spaces out on the road. Like, it all has to be on-site parking. It just seems like we're putting blinders on. It's like, they're there, you know? So,
But that's the way it is all over town. I mean, sidewalks, downtown, they're not specialized uses for the businesses there. They're just
I know.
parking, they're not.
It just seems crazy, but anyway.
I
All
think
right.
it is, I think that's the consensus from the town planning side, is that the way we do it is a little bit
Yeah,
crazy,
Okay.
but.
yeah. So maybe you can.
All right, so that's kind of the gist. So, Tyler, you're gonna move forward with the application.
Correct.
Part of that, okay. Any other questions or comments about that? Because essentially, and if I understood Pete and Marcia, the board says the committee should take care of it. We're gonna take care of it,
That was my understanding.
okay?
So can you just, once again, just what's the difference, what does B4 give us that Village doesn't?
I'm gonna read through the.
I
You have
don't,
the-
I have Village, I don't have B4 in front of
I've
me,
got it
but
here.
if you can get it on the computer. Basically, it gives you professional office
Okay, so that's what it is.
and
Okay.
tradesmen.
Great.
So B4 has all of the residential pieces that Mike described. It allows for churches, community buildings, municipal use, nursery schools and daycares, private schools, public schools, and then quasi-public facilities. And then under commercial, it lists financial services excluding drive-throughs, funeral homes, hair salons, inns, neighborhood stores, personal services, storage in barns and others, and then other low-impact items that meet some other definitions further on. Tradesman shops, essential services, road construction, accessory uses, the home occupations, homestay, and then special exceptions were community living uses, congregate housing, nursing nursing homes, rooming houses, auto repair garages, professional offices, and then health service facilities.
Are those the ones that are permitted with a special exception?
Correct.
So that the last.
The last one was special
I think
exception.
it's inappropriate. I appreciate the list, just because we're being recorded, it helps.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, even schools are special exceptions in the village district right now.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Then we'll move on. Awesome.
Is there anything else that would make things easier for you guys while we're asking for changes? is there anything specific to parking or that would,
I'm not sure it's something that this committee could tackle. I don't think
yeah,
this-
I'm aware of that, but maybe,
No, I mean, this is the biggest thing.
Are we locked in right now?
Rolling brownouters.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
everything just locked up.
Too many AC on.
Fine, I didn't hear.
So I think within the timeline of this committee's work, I'm not sure there's much more
okay.
we can ask. I'll run it by the office. The biggest challenge, I think, on the site will be parking. But our civil engineer and landscape people have been going through it and feel like we're pretty close. So,
What if some parking were, the town is now leasing
Yep,
those parking lots down there? I think even the school's gonna use some of those for
yeah, temporary.
part of your, if the town were to share something with you
I'm not
in
sure
the
how-
school, or,
I'm not sure how that would flow through on the review side where it's a lease and they're looking in perpetuity. So I'm not sure if that helps.
maybe just keep it on your radar
Yeah.
and come to the town if there's, because we do a lot of like leasing parking spots. Some people call it like a false economy based on our crazy rules that, you can lease these spots to these businesses, and that allows, even if those spots are never, ever, ever used by
So
the
big.
people that go to those businesses, it's like a,
Came about from when MBA came into town. That's when the transfer leases, leases spaces, because there was so much development and the spots, the zoning didn't catch up with the development quick enough.
All right, anything else?
Just the timing, just to reiterate, I guess, I know Tyler said this, but like, they have to start with the planning board on July 19th to get the process rolling to be on the warrant article for November. And there's multiple steps in between
Yeah.
there. And I know, Allison, you brought up at the last meeting, do we have to push this zoning ordinance change to line up in November? And is there merit in that? I think there is, but I don't know.
I mean, I guess I was questioning more, I think the zoning change isn't gonna be as big of an issue as presenting this whole plan to voters.
Yeah.
So if I were to choose one to push back on, I don't anticipate a lot of resistance with the zoning thing, but.
Right. So we press ahead, I guess.
So the planning board needs to have the request for the 19th. Is that at their meeting on the 19th?
It has to be in beforehand because it has to go out, be added to the agenda, and
So the meeting is the 19th?
Yes.
Do we need to have people attending that meeting?
I doubt on the first meeting, but
Yeah.
Jeremy's gonna put together the information.
So he'll sort of not represent us, but be there.
Yeah, we'll find out more probably
Okay.
sometime tomorrow when he has a chance to kind of go through that process with the dates.
We just don't want to miss out on, they look at it and say, well, nobody showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a meeting and then there's a public hearing, that they hold a public hearing and.
Yes, they have to hold their public hearing, which
Two
will,
public hearings, he said.
Yeah.
is it,
On the select board agenda first, before it went to the planning board, in order to, as part of the fast tracking.
they ran almost concurrently.
Right, we like agreed to fast track it somehow, and I don't,
I would probably defer that to Jeremy. He was gonna go through the
Okay.
regs on that one because he hadn't done the map change yet in this position, so I would
Yeah.
definitely defer to him, but it's,
All right. Anything else? Moving on. Finalizing the lease framework, and I say finalize somewhat loosely. I sent everybody, I think the last version that we had, I didn't get any other feedback in terms of any other changes unless there was something somebody else saw that I should go back and tweak. But I know that, when we take a look at, this is pretty far down the road, is there enough in the framework that would not allow the board, but give the board enough confidence to say, hey, this kind of meets what we need to kind of start or have a foundation for, and then the board could tweak or do with it what they needed to once the timing came up, which is well down the road, to start seeking out a tenant. And that's why I don't know if, Marcia or Pete, if you guys had any other thoughts on that in terms of the board perspective, but I haven't had any other feedback on the framework, so I didn't know if there was anything else that we needed to discuss or tweak, or it stands as it is. And I'm certainly open to go back and tweak or do whatever. Allison?
I mean, I think it's generally fine. It's just so far off in the distance that
Agree?
if, some kind of language that just communicates flexibility, I guess, or that it's ultimately the school board, and the school board changes and the school, so it's whatever we do can be changed by the school board, and it, depending on the circumstance.
I think
So-
the value now is to communicate to voters, what we have in mind,
Yeah.
what might be happening in the building
Mhm.
before they vote, make a decision in November more than anything else.
Mhm.
We have that last bullet item, additional uses may be reviewed at time of lease negotiation.
Yeah.
So that's up to the school board.
I mean, really, maybe even just to say that is, it's almost more of a school board document than a
Yeah.
committee document, because
Right.
it's communicated, right, these are the types of things that the school board would consider for.
My sense is that when it gets time to lease, that the school board's gonna need to take a look at it and say, yeah, this is good or not good. I mean, I see a couple things that need to be tightened. I would say, where it says, leasing will promptly procure and maintain and comply with all permits. Prompt is a bad word, just, there needs to be dates in there, there needs to be specifics. But that happens down the road.
Yeah.
And so for presenting to voters to say, here's what we're thinking, what should be in there, I think this is fine.
Any other thoughts on that, folks? We'll make sure that we're good where we are, then we'll stick with that.
So do you want to, instead of additional uses, I like that line, but would you want to use any additional uses and restrictions? Because part of
That's a good
the
idea.
effort of the lease is to restrict what's being established with the zone changes. I mean, the idea is that, the school board will eventually have the ultimate say, and the lease can be used to restrict authorized uses in the zone.
Right. I mean, maybe we're gonna put this out too for public feedback, and there's gonna be a bunch of people that say, you have to promise that you'll never let X, Y, or Z, and, that might be considered. Because I think we are doing public input at this, right? That's kind of part of what we're doing now, is putting this lease framework out, and then people are all gonna inquire, or they're gonna provide input, and possibly we would change things.
And right now,
based on-
our possible uses is quite restricted because of the zone.
Sure.
And the next zone, if it gets approved as B4, is still pretty restricted.
Mhm.
So we always have that to fall back on.
Yeah.
And then the lease is kind of the next
And
step.
the school board can restrict even
Further
further.
balance that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, so I think that it's a great framework, and like Marcia said, and Allison said, we are looking at something that won't even be negotiated for at least 2 more years.
Okay, so was there anything, Pete, that did you feel like?
Additional
there-
uses and restrictions, maybe or will be reviewed at the time of lease negotiation. If that makes sense.
Based on zoning or something that ties to zoning, is that?
I don't even know, zoning is kind of a given, and that'll change a bit depending on what happens with, any changes to the spot zoning or
Okay.
local government.
All right, well, I'll craft
Yeah.
something and throw it out to everybody, and you can weigh in, and we'll get this done. I'll do that, maybe even tonight. All right, anything else on the framework?
Do we need to say what zone, that it's currently located in the village district, but the committee or the board is pursuing a request for a zoning change?
Ooh, I wouldn't get into that
No.
right now. I mean, personally, if I were part of the public just looking at it, I'd think, oh, what do they mean by that?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just better, if they're interested in finding out what zone they're in, they'll look it up and see